How is the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs using enterprise risk management, ERM, to assess threats and opportunities facing the department? What is VA doing to anticipate the future? And how can strategic foresight and customer-driven ERM help government leaders make better decisions? We'll explore these questions and so much more with my very special guest, Preston Finley, Director of Foresight, Strategic Planning, and Risk Management at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Also joining me today from IBM is Mark Newsome. I was wondering, what's the purpose of VA's Enterprise Risk ERM program? What prompted its creation, and how does it support the overall mission of VA?
So wasn't with VA at the time. I was with another agency at that time. But A123 was released, and of course you had the playbooks and you had other documents. But it finally codified it and said, this is what you shall do and you must do. And they literally broke it up in the must do's and the should do's. And it gave some guidance. It gave federal guidance so that they could say, oh, this is how we start. And this is how we can get things moving. And then you mature it as you move along. But in VA's case, I believe that was the same truth, is that this information made them go, oh, okay, well, this is enough guidance. We can actually get started, because risk is not something that everybody knows about, that everybody does naturally. And this gave it clear guidance on what we must do and what we can achieve by doing it. So that was a pivotal document.
Thanks for that, Preston. And would you tell us more about your duties and responsibilities as Director of Strategic Foresight and Risk Management at the VA?
Well, actually, that has expanded since we last spoke. So I'm actually now the Director of Foresight, Strategic Planning, and Risk Management for VA. They've combined, pulled another team in under my umbrella. So I have that whole gambit, with the exception of maybe governance and performance, but I have the other pieces now. So which aligns perfectly in my mind. And with A11 and A123 now nesting together in the same function. So, but our duties are in both spaces, of course, now is to, and think about it in a linear way to a certain extent, although it is more of a swirl, because these things constantly are supporting and connecting to each other in almost like a Deming cycle to a degree. And so foresight is the advance notice of potential things for strategic planning. And foresight, actually the Federal Foresight Community of Interest was originally born and founded by VA. And that's why I started participating in it from another agency when I worked for the U.S. Postal Service. And so I worked with VA back then on foresight, as well as teaching foresight to other agencies, giving them guidance on a variety of things. And that helps to establish the emerging risks and the emerging opportunities that an agency could take advantage of or mitigate. So, but you got to know those things in advance. So you don't just do strategic planning in a vacuum, and it isn't necessarily a day-by-day activity, but A11 basically says you should be doing some form of foresight so you don't get surprised, and that you can manage that in advance. So once you have good insights of what the future is going to be, you can start to develop reasonable strategic plans, especially if you're doing it on a constant basis. Otherwise, you're having to do big, giant, major surge effort. But if you do it all along, every day, and you pick up little pieces here and there and tidbits, and you track spaces, then you can really, really provide some real insights to senior leadership so that can inform the strategic plan, so that you can be better prepared. Now, of course, once the strategic plan and all that has been disseminated and it's fully understood, and you've tied it to the objectives, and you put it against budget, and you got your resources organized, and you start working against that plan so that you can accomplish what you intend to accomplish. You also need the risk leg. You have to have the risk leg to ensure your strategies are going to be successful. Most organizations are good at it, but only if they've got experience, knowledge, and the right people in those places. There seems to be a bit of a shortage of risk professionals, it seems to me, in the federal service. And when we talk on the side in a lot of places, there's just not a lot of people who know how to do it in the federal space. Because if you come from private sector, the approach is a little different. And they're looking more at opportunities. And you don't see opportunities all the time in risk registers in the federal space, not as often as I would expect it to be. So you got to have the risks, and that is a critical function. You need the evidence and the assessments from the risk management to ensure that your strategies are successful.
Preston, before we delve into specifics, I want to talk about concepts and introduce them to our audience. What is enterprise risk management, ERM? And more importantly, how does it differ from traditional risk management approaches?
Well, it started out, as I mentioned earlier, it started out more as a financial activity. Who did most risk management early? The financial businesses, the financial companies. They were the ones doing most of it initially. And it morphed from there, and it's moved along. It's gotten a lot of compliance activities. You got a lot of financial activities. And even recently, in the last couple of years, OMB has given guidance, and very specific guidance, to start reaching beyond financials, start reaching beyond compliance. Go for the non-financial, and not necessarily compliance, although sometimes they are. And but that's almost by happenstance, because some of the best risks may be something that's being audited or tracked. But in this case, they've given guidance. You should be doing more of this. You should be doing more foresight. You should be doing the whole ecosystem that makes strategies work. From the front side foresight to strategic planning, the risk management, the performance, the governance, all of those things need to be there. You have to have evidence. You have to have requirements. All these best practices have to come together. And it's difficult for many organizations to pull all those threads together into one spot and to make it work. And but that's one of the challenges. The federal sector has got a little bit later start in general. I know that organizations like DoD have done risk management programs for many, many years, but civilian agencies haven't done it as long. And they certainly haven't been doing it as long as some of the biggest companies in the world who have been at this for 20, 30, 40 years. So we're kind of still trying to play catch up. But between OMB and many of our partners and other agencies have got some great ideas, and they're really doing great work and advancing and maturing their organization through that.
So now I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about your concept of customer-driven ERM. What exactly is that, and how can one apply sort of agile methods applications in ERM across the department?
Well, that's the thing, right? So I've worked in other places, and I've seen a lot of different risk approaches, and I've got certifications and all that too. But even then, when you've got even a couple certifications or experience or however you have it, you're going to come up with your own style typically, and try to do it a certain way. Now, in my case with risk in particular, I think that it should be assessed. You got to look at it, you got to think about it. And I think foresight's one of the most important pieces, because you don't want to do it after the risk has already hit your front door. You want to know that opportunity or risk when it's still curbside. You've got some space and you can do something with it. And that's one of the critical pieces of it. And I find it kind of funny because people get too focused sometimes on the compliance elements, and they're not really thinking all the time about opportunities. That seems to be kind of a nascent space. And I could tell you right now, some of the biggest ones I've seen that brought the most value, I'll give a couple examples of VA, but I want to just highlight one Postal Service did. And I got to play a small part in it too. So it's not like I was the big leader, the big honcho, anything like that. But I definitely had a small part to play. But do you remember when we had all those rate changes at the Postal Service? And they would do this like change from whatever, 39 cents to 42 cents or something, right? And Postal Service would get beat up every night on the evening news, and the newspapers and radio shows and everything else that was going on. Every time one happened, because it was such a tough experience for people. They would have to go buy those markup stamps and everything else. And it was quite a challenge. And there's times where they would run out, people would be upset. And it was actually really, really traumatic for people, some people anyways. And it was tough for us too, to hear we're getting beat up every day. And so the idea came about that, well, this is one of our biggest pain points. And so this is just not good for our customers. Why do they have to do this? And so the idea came about that, why don't you just have forever stamps that you buy it now at 39 cents, and down the road, you've been hanging on to them, hoarding them, whatever you're going to do. And maybe someday it'll be 50 cents worth of stamps and you paid 39. Woo, you just made a profit. But in this case, it's a huge factor for the customer. Turned out it's also a huge benefit to the organization, because now you don't have to rotate out the stock, the stamps, and ship them all back and then destroy them, because you have to destroy excess postage. It's technically legal tender. And so it saved tons of cost. It helps with compliance. And it actually really was a game changer for customers. They never had to go back and go get those makeup stamps. You could just run out of whatever stamps you got, go buy some more, and you didn't have to deal with any of it. So it was a huge game changer. And actually, it started out only for commemoratives, but it's pretty much extended to every line of business Postal Service has now, whether it's priority mail or packages, things like that. There's a forever stamp for almost everything. And it's very, very easy for the customer, and that's a huge win. When I joined VA, I knew it was somewhat innovative and pretty interesting in that way. But I tell you what, now that I've been here, and I just was pitching this, that VA and most agencies do a horrible job of marketing themselves. Because the fact of the matter is you should be highlighting all the amazing things you do. And they do every day. And there's the public-private partnerships that they've got with some of the new ones, and with Squib and stuff like that are awesome. And they're trying to use all sorts of tools to try to improve the experience for the veterans, their family, as well as their caregivers. So like one of them, it's interesting, I was working a little bit with the Veterans Experience Office for a while there, and a couple good friends over there, Lee Becker, some others. And so in this case, they brought that out. It's been a few years now, but they've finally got it kind of dialed in, and their data that they get in real time and then provide back out to not just the healthcare facilities, but to disability claim units, to memorializations and cemeteries, and they can inform every group of basically where their major pain points are. And you can pivot on that very quickly. So a very quick, fast example, a large VA medical center, had almost routinely had high scores on a 5-star scale, but it started dropping precipitously, and everybody's like, "What is going on?" And so they're trying to figure it out, and VEO provided some knowledge from the various systems that we use for customer experience. And they found out that, and it was not something they even thought about, was the pharmacy. The pharmacy was very slow. My understanding is at least one of the people was rather surly and not quite as customer focused as they should be. And it just took a long time. It wasn't good service. It wasn't polite service as much as it should be. And it was the major pain point. And they were able to pivot on that within a few weeks. All of a sudden, the scores start ticking back up. The issues were addressed, and the processes were improved, and they get a great experience again. So if you can get insights like that in fairly near real time, that is a game changer, because then you can focus again on the customers and root out the pain points and problems and process issues and address them long before it becomes a major issue. It just becomes a blip, and people can forget a blip. And they can excuse and be fine with a blip as long as it isn't long lasting. And that's when you lose customers, which in VA, you can lose customers. There are people who have the wherewithal to be able to go and not go to VA and choose other medical channels. And we want to be the ones they want to go to, because we are the best at serving the veteran with a strong veteran workforce.
Preston, your portfolio is getting larger. So what are your key priorities of your office?
So in our case, I'm going to always kind of pitch the things that I think should need to be matured, because as the director, that's one of my jobs. So we have the governance piece for that. And so we have created the documents, try to make them user-friendly, worked with all of our clients to develop the handbook, directive, charters, all the documents that you need. And we're building the right tools to make it easy for them and easy for their internal controls to flow naturally into the risk register, where it is triaged and determined which level it is: enterprise, functional, and local. And so that's all in the works. Some of it is done, some of it is almost done. So we have to kind of lead the program, but we also, I conduct all the work group meetings and the Enterprise Risk Council meetings, who vote on risks and what's in the risks and what's in the risk profile. and all the steps throughout. But our goal and our job is to mature the organization to where risk management brings high value to senior leadership so they can make all the right decisions for VA and their customers. And that is our intent. That's in a nutshell. Between the foresight, the strategy, and the risks, we can cover a good large amount of space to try to help give them all the materials and guidance that they need to make those decisions.
That's awesome. Can we talk outcomes? Would you outline the desired outcomes VA seeks to achieve from its ERM program?
So if a good ERM program that encompasses all the bells and whistles, right, to where everything's connected, you have all the stakeholder plans, the dependencies, you have to pull in. You mentioned about Agile, but there's a lot of activities organizations can do that are like single stream sound. They sound like they're single stream, like Lean Six Sigma or Agile or something on those lines. These are processes. These are approaches. And if you've got a lot of these pieces in place, you can tackle many things, but you got to have them connected. They have to be working. Your risks have to be supporting the strategies. Now, there are things that are compliance, and you know what? They're going to be in a risk register, but they shouldn't be one of your highest scoring risk register items. Risk register items, in my opinion, should belong to ones that are customer driven. The most important ones are the CDRM type things, customer driven risk management. The compliance activities, financial things, those are all processes that you need to manage, and you need to manage them appropriately. But I don't typically view those as like the 5s out of 5 scores for likelihood, velocity, and impact. It's anything hitting the customers gets those kind of scores in our mind. And that's how we try to guide it as best we can. So keep the focus on what matters most. So those are a couple of the activities, but the Lean Six Sigma, I'm a big fan of Lean Six Sigma. I'm certified in that. And I'd have no problem with Agile, but that's a little bit more IT centric, and I'm not in IT, but we do work closely with IT. So, and I do understand the value of it. But the Lean Six Sigma approach, I think, in both organizations use it, VA as well as Postal Service. That is another way to shortcut the problems, and without even having to put up a risk. You just do a quick win, triage it, fix it, adjust it. Didn't work, do it again, and keep it going in the cycle until it's all fixed. And then disseminate that knowledge across the organization so everybody can benefit from those advantages. And before you know it, you're going to see some of those risks drop significantly quickly because you've spread this great best practice across an entire organization. That's huge when you can find those spaces.
And now I'd like to delve into another aspect of your portfolio, strategic foresight. What is strategic foresight, and how does it differ from futuristic forecasting?
So to me, when you do the futuristic forecasting, a lot of times it's data that's extrapolated from historical many times, right? And you get these scenarios, the econometrics, things like that could develop the baseline scenario for moving forward, as well as the most optimistic, most pessimistic. You see those in different variations, and they're all useful, and they help the conversation for risk and strategies, to be honest, because if you are risk averse, you're going to go lean more towards the baseline, maybe even go pessimistic intentionally because you just don't want the risk exposure. But if you're a very aggressive organization and you have a greater tolerance for risk, you might be leaning more towards that optimistic side and trying to push that direction. But there's nothing wrong with analysis. You should be doing analysis. You should be doing financial and data analysis, predictive as best as possible. But you also then, you have to temper that to a degree with real, and this is where the art comes in. So there's a science to it in mathematics. There's also putting the pieces together. And this is a challenge for like most organizations, is that you have to have folks who read a lot, follow the trends, find the niches, if you will, where everything is coming together in a confluence, where one thing is important, two things important, three things just made it an amazing opportunity, and you have to track that. And when you see certain things occur, you already have to have those plans in place. And so I'm aware of one that occurred at Postal Service while I was there, where these kinds of plans were in place. It was being tracked for quite some time. And there were plans if this happened, because I mean, Amazon is a definite partner of the Postal Service, and they have been for quite some time. And but they also at one point in time kind of were perhaps viewed as a risk, that they would take share from any shipper, including Postal Service. And so you have to kind of watch that. And okay, what is it? Is it an opportunity? Is it a risk? Is it both? And so you have to watch that, and get enough information, get the plans together, and modify them as needed. And then when something comes along, in this case, Postal Service got a signal that something was about to occur, specifically that Amazon was going to start launching their own delivery system in the greater DC area. So because of the plans that were in place, they were able to go meet with the important people in that organization. And within a few days, they had a number of pilots organized with that organization, of which now is Sunday Delivered. Back then it was called Early Bird, but they accomplished a lot. It was really great planning on their part and knowing when to act upon it. And it's benefited both organizations that participate in it to this day. So those are things that came out of Foresight, planning, risk planning, and it worked. And it brought a lot of value to the organization at the time in a window that was challenging.
What does the future hold for the use of strategic foresight and customer-driven ERM?
With us, we try to focus again within our organization and trying to mature the organization, and also to mature them to the point where they're focused the most on, in this case, customer-driven initiatives or veteran-driven initiatives. Bring better outcomes. Now, the organization they were doing this before I came to VA, and it's only getting better, and they're maturing very quickly. And we partner with them very closely. We want to know their insights as well, and just so we can kind of track and trend it, monitor it ourselves. And now we're not going to do it on a micro level. We'll track it more as a macro level from our function and our responsibility. But I do love to get there. They shoot me over. I got an email impromptu from a friend of mine who's working in that department. Shot me some very cool insights that are related to our customer base, and it was a wonderful read. And we kind of wove that into some of our other Foresight activities, and shared a few things with some other places within the organization so that they could benefit from it too. So Foresight, I can't preach it enough. Customer-driven management. Risk management is the name of the game. And if you're not doing some kind of foresight activity, you're never going to anticipate those customer needs in advance. You have to do it on a religious basis. It is almost like your own church, that you are wanting to be in there and trying to find out, divine, if you will, the opportunities to find something that's going to help your customers and your employees. I mean, it's both, because you got to have great employees to have good customer service. So it's got to affect something that drives the experience. And those are the most important ones.
This has been the Business of Government Hour, a conversation with Preston Finley, Director of Foresight, Strategic Planning, and Risk Management at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. My co-host today from IBM was Mark Newsome. Subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast app. And as always at businessofgovernment.org.